So I'm Harriet Festing. I'm director of Higher Ground, which is the largest flood survivor network in the country. And I'm joined by Hilton Kelley, flood survivor and resident of Port Arthur, Texas. Before Hilton, I introduce you properly, I just want to say to anybody who's watching this, if your community is impacted by flooding, please join the Higher Ground network. We are here to help you. We particularly work with groups of residents and provide them support. You'll find us on the Higher Ground Facebook group, and then you can connect with me, Harriet Festing, and we can get you to join our bigger network. So thank you so much, Hilton, for joining us. Hilton, you are a man of many hats. You are founder and executive director of CEDA, that's Community Empowered Development Association, an environmental justice organization. You are indeed a multi-award-winning environmental justice advocate, a restaurant owner that had to close down after Hurricane Harvey, but is very much a businessman, veteran, and you're on the Leadership Council for Higher Ground, which makes you very well positioned to speak on behalf of your community. And I've seen just in the last few days, you in the media a lot doing just that. COVID-19 has obviously had a huge impact on Port Arthur. And that's a city that was impacted. 80% of the homes in Port Arthur were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. So you've got multiple pandemics facing residents. Can you just give me a kind of description of what it feels like on the streets, obviously on your own, on the streets of Port Arthur, and what you feel the impacts of COVID-19 and the recession is having?
Well, here in the city of Port Arthur, we are a city of about 50,000 residents, and it really does feel different. Many of our streets are basically abandoned and seems just very desolate due to the lack of people downtown, in the old downtown area near West Port Arthur. The city has basically shut down, and only the essential folks are able to go to work and operate right now, except if you are an independent business owner and you still have maybe some construction projects going on. As long as you practice social distancing, you'll be okay. And the police really haven't cracked down on heavy enforcement of any personnel walking down the street as of yet. But yet on the weekends, usually it's pretty busy. All of our restaurants are shut down. It's only delivery and takeout. The bars are shut down. The movie theaters are shut down. People are not visiting. They are really adhering to the rules that have been laid out by our governor due to COVID-19.
And so one of the things that you've been in the media a lot in the last few days about is the rollback, well, the broader rollback by EPA of the emission standards, and now their statement that they are not enforcing violations. Tell me about how you think that might be impacting residents in Port Arthur.
Well, number one, Port Arthur is surrounded by refineries and chemical plants. I mean, we have the largest oil refinery in the Northern Hemisphere. We have the Motiva oil refinery, which is the largest. We have Valero, we have Chevron Chemical, we have BASF, which is a German-owned company. We have Total Refinery, which is German-owned. BASF is a chemical company. And we also have Huntsman Chemical right down the road in Beaumont. We have ExxonMobil. We have Oxbow Calcining, which is a pet coke facility. And Oxbow Calcining, by the way, emits 98% of all the sulfur dioxide into the air, more so than all the refineries put together throughout the county. We have a disproportionate amount of pollution being dumped into our air here in the city of Port Arthur. And to add insult to injury, what we're finding from the reports is that COVID-19, it really takes a toll on people that are already suffering with pre-existing conditions when it comes to respiratory issues, hypertension, liver or kidney disease. And we have a large number of people with respiratory and heart disease as well. So what we've learned through the media is that COVID-19, it further exacerbates those problems. And it also, many times, it leads to death if you come up with COVID-19, which we've seen in the media where I think about 70% of the COVID patients in Louisiana are African Americans. Then we have the same problem in Detroit, in Illinois, where 15% of there are 15% of the population, but 41% of the victims to COVID-19. So this is a critical issue, particularly for the African American communities. And I think more needs to be done to get to the bottom of it, because this COVID-19 virus is devastating everyone really, but it's really hitting hard in the African American communities due to pre-existing conditions, due to pollution that we've had to breathe over numerous years, and the conditions we suffer from for various other reasons.
Right. And have you actually seen, can you see for yourself? So when I visited Port Arthur, one of the things that struck me was really just the dominance of the landscape of these oil refineries, just these huge buildings, refineries. Can you actually see that there are more contaminants in the air, or it's just something that you know that they're being told that they're not enforcing violations?
Well, no, I mean, you can actually see when there is a emission event taking place. There's these derricks that they rise maybe about a good 5 or 6 stories into the air. And many times when there's an emission event going on at one of the facilities, there's a huge flare that lights up, and the flare sometimes is about 40 to 50 feet off the tip of the derrick. And most of the time it's spewing out this black soot, this smoke, and the smoke travels many times for up to 4 to 5 miles, if not further, depending on the size of the particulate matter that's being emitted. But many times what's happening is they're burning off gases, or they're actually burning product due to the fact they had to shut down a unit or start a unit and they had to clear the pipes out, but they're actually burning product. And because of this particular process, be it man-made or a natural disaster or an accident, the fence line community, meaning the people that live closest to those industries, are heavily impacted. And also people down the road are also impacted as well, little do they know. But yet we are doing everything we can to push these industries to do the best that they can, to use the best available control technologies, and to upgrade many of the units they have out there, because many times these accidents are caused due to antiquated equipment or failure to change out certain valves and whatnot in a timely fashion. So yes, we can definitely see and smell many of the toxins that are killing us.
Wow. And that, of course, is on top of a city that is still trying to recover from Hurricane Harvey. And that had a major impact on you personally. You know, when we first connected, which was just soon after Hurricane Harvey, you were living in a FEMA trailer at that time because your home had been so devastated. Can you tell me a little bit more about your own experiences of flooding and the broader city?
Well, when it comes to storms here on the Gulf Coast, we're no stranger to storms. But I do remember a time when hurricanes weren't as frequent. I know back in the 70s and 80s and in the 90s even, we didn't have hurricanes, but maybe every 10, maybe 15 years. And they weren't very strong, and they stayed south, more like by Corpus Christi. And the furthest they would come up to the Port Arthur, Houston area was somewhere in between Corpus and Houston. But now what we're seeing is that the pattern of the hurricanes that come into the Gulf are more north. They're either hitting Houston or Port Arthur or the Louisiana area now, more so than the Corpus Christi area. But yet, and they're becoming more frequent. Within the last, I would say within the last 15 years, we have seen at least maybe 4 to 5 hurricanes coming to the Gulf per year. And we believe that it's largely in part because of climate change and global warming. Never have we seen the number of hurricanes that we've been dealing with over the last 15 years within a 1-year period. I know that we have been hit thus far. In 2005 was when it started for me. I moved back to Port Arthur in 2000, and the first hurricane I dealt with after coming back home here to Port Arthur was Hurricane Rita. Prior to Hurricane Rita hitting Port Arthur, I believe it was Hurricane Katrina, which hit the New Orleans area. Now, when Hurricane Katrina hit the New Orleans area, those folks were stuck for days, and they weren't even able to be rescued out of that city. But then when they were able to be rescued, many of those people that lived in New Orleans were sort of brought to various areas all over the southern region, and many of them were brought here to the city of Port Arthur. Well, about 2 months after those folks were brought here for refuge, we got hit by Hurricane Rita. And this was in 2005. So, and after that, it's been Hurricane Gustav, Hurricane Ike, Hurricane Harvey, and a few smaller ones in between Harvey and Rita. So it's, it's almost like the new norm. And I've been impacted several times, but Harvey was the first hurricane that really gave us a wallop. We had 3 feet of water that poured into our home, even though it was in a so-called non-flood zone.
Wow. And so tell me about that journey. So the water came into your home, what happened? What did you do next?
Well, when we noticed that something was different, me and my wife, we were in our home when the rain started to pour down from Hurricane Harvey in 2017. I think it was August the 28th, 2017. And I woke up about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I just heard this sound on the roof, and it was just consistent. I mean, I couldn't even relate it to rain. So I looked outside my window, and I noticed that the sky looked almost like it was a fog bank, but it wasn't fog. It was actually rain, and the rain droplets were so tight together you could barely see a half a block down the road. And so when I noticed that the rain was highly unusual, I looked at the street and I saw the water that was starting to build up in the street. And I just kind of felt uneasy about that. And this was like 7 a.m. And so I told my wife, I said, I think we really should consider leaving and maybe seeking higher ground, because it seems like the water is gonna invade the yard. And so she looked out the window and she concurred with that, thought maybe we should leave. So we packed a few things and we took off, and we headed to our restaurant, which is in the downtown area, which never floods, very much like our neighborhood. But the downtown area has better drainage from what I've learned. And so anyway, we kind of buckled down there. And after a day, we came back to our home and checked out our house. We noticed that the water was in the street. It hadn't made it up to the stoop at that particular time. So the next day, we went back to the restaurant. We stayed there overnight again. The rains came again. And so we wanted to come back to our home to gather some more things, because it looked like this was going to take some time. But when we came back the second time, we noticed that our home was inundated with water. We couldn't even get within four city blocks of our home. I had to walk in the flood waters. And I would not ever recommend that, because what I found is that there are electrical wires down in the south, on the southern region here on the coast. We have cottonmouth snakes, which are highly poisonous. We have alligators and other dangerous critters and debris that can harm you. But yet I did what I had to do, and I made it to our home, and I found that we had not been spared from the torrential rains and the winds.
Right. And so then you ended up how long out of your home?
Well, we at that particular point, we realized that we had to stay at the restaurant. And so we stayed there for like maybe 3 days until the first responders, I think the first responders were on the ground probably about maybe 3 days after that second rain, and people had to be rescued out of the Vista area, which is a suburb to the city of Port Arthur, but it is a part of Port Arthur. It's a more rural community, and many people had water in their homes up to 5 and 6 feet. In some cases, in the Montrose area, it was 7 feet, and these people had to be flighted out. I mean, helicopters had to go in. The Cajun Navy was a huge help. The Cajun Navy came in from Houston, I think other parts of Louisiana, like North Louisiana, they made their way in. I mean, these guys had to come in high trucks pulling their boats because I-10, the corridor that comes into Port Arthur from Houston and stretches all the way across the US from California to Florida, the I-10 interstate, it was flooded. And these guys came in with these huge trucks pulling boats, and they started, rescuing folks. They just got to work until they couldn't do it anymore, and more rain was forecast to come in. So it was a really turbulent time. And myself and Mr. Eddie Brown, we did what we could to assist others. As the Cajun Navy brought citizens up to the road, I had a van and he had a van, and we would pick the people up and bring them to shelters. But soon those shelters even became inundated with water, and people had to find other places to go, but there was nowhere else to go. So the military started taking people outside the city in these amphibious type vehicles. It was really a trying and nerve-wracking time.
Right, I can imagine.
But what we did, we took off, we went to New Orleans, not to New Orleans, but I mean to Baton Rouge. We made it all the way to Baton Rouge after the water started to recede. And because everything here was closed, the stores was closed, there was no food to be had. And so I thought it was best that we get out of Port Arthur. And it wasn't that easy. We had to take back roads through the woods to get out because all the major roads outside of Port Arthur were either covered with wood debris or trees, and you could not get out. So you really would have to have known the area to make it out. And being from the area, I took chances because I know some of the roads, I know some of the back roads, and we were able to make it to Baton Rouge, and then we buckled down there. I think that's when you contacted me and we started talking about what was going on. And also we stayed at my stepdaughter's house when we first came back after being gone for about 3 days. And from there, we were able to operate, and we were able to keep people informed about what was going on environmentally when it comes to spillage from some of our industries. And so, we just did what we could to assist others, even though we were dealing with our own issues as well.
Incredible. One of the first things that you and I worked on, and you were out of your home, so many of your neighbors were out of their homes, and one of the first things that we sort of talked about was whether or not residents should consider actually long-term moving, i.e. managed retreat out of the city. And I think, initially you were hesitant, and then my memory of how I understood your reactions was you were kind of then going, well, maybe this is, I remember you say plan A, plan B, maybe we do need to think about plan B. And then you went out and interviewed various people to see if they were interested in having their homes bought out. And you came back with quite a strong message that while there was the odd person here and there, generally people did not want to leave. Can you explain their reasoning and what you feel about that now?
Well, many of the people here in the Port Arthur area, they love their community. They love their culture. They love their neighbors. And this is their way of life here. Many people have been here all their life. And many of the people that own homes here and property, they work really hard for it. And to be 55, 60, 70 years old, to be just plucked out and having to go to a strange community where you have to start completely over, and you'll never get a fair market price for your home here. So, you're strapped for cash. But yet it's really because of the love that people have for the culture, for the environment, and for our way of life here on the Gulf Coast. But yet there are some folks who have elected to move out. They wish they could have stayed, but because they have gone through so many storms, they just couldn't hold on anymore. But my feeling is this: is that even though we deal with hurricanes every year and we have floods, and many people can't withstand that amount of pressure every year. But I think for those that could, I think we should do everything that we can to fight to help preserve or reserve the coastal areas from California, from the Gulf Coast, all the way up the Eastern Seaboard, because it's worth fighting for. Our coastal areas are very important to many, many people, millions of people. And if we don't stand and fight for it and try to do something to eliminate the issues with climate change and to turn that particular dynamic around, then we're going to be lost. Because can you imagine if we all picked up from our coastal communities here on the Gulf Coast and maybe from coastal areas in the New York area or in California, and we all just decided to move inward? What a disruption that would be for other communities, and how stressful that would be for other communities, and how much property would be lost for families that once had property in the coastal communities. So therefore, I think we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to this country to do everything we can to fight to reserve the coastal communities, because it is a very unique environment in the coastal communities and it's worth fighting for. But I feel that our government, local, state, and federal, should do more to assist groups like myself and your organization and our organization, what I sit on the board of with Anthropocene and Higher Ground. I think they should do more to pitch in to help our efforts in what we're doing with the Higher Ground Network and with Anthropocene. I think that it's important that we get as much federal support as we can. Congressmen need to jump in on this and assist, because the work that we have embarked upon, initially when you and I talked, I didn't understand where it was all going with the Anthropocene and Higher Ground thing. Maybe it was because I was dealing with my issues at that particular time. You caught me when it was very fresh and we were still living in a trailer, trying to figure out how we were gonna, get our home back together. But actually, this movement that has been created by you is a great movement. I mean, it's a very timely movement and it's a very necessary movement. And I am very happy to be a part of it, and looking forward to standing shoulder to shoulder with all the members and the board members to do everything I can to assist with saving our coastal communities and doing what we can to reduce global warming and to reduce flooding.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Hilton. And we're so grateful to have you on the Leadership Council. One last question, really. So you're quite right. When we first met, you were in a FEMA trailer van, and we had really only just recently launched Higher Ground. So we were ourselves kind of trying to figure out exactly how we could best support you. And now
Right.
I think we have some kind of clarity, and we're working with you on this mix of potential solutions, from nature-based solutions to flooding, such as, preserving wetlands, building rain gardens, to looking at where people do want to be bought out, actually making sure that they get a fair price and that they are safely relocated to somewhere that won't flood, to looking at elevating homes. Does that sound like a correct description of where we are now?
Oh, most definitely. That's exactly where we are. As a matter of fact, last week I did a Facebook Live production for the citizens here in the city of Port Arthur, even though many people from various areas around the country join in, but yet we did a Facebook Live to help educate folks on what's going on the ground with the Community Empowerment Development Association and our partnership with the Higher Ground Network and all of the resources which have been afforded us through the Higher Ground Network and Anthropocene. I mean, the wealth of resources through information, through knowledge, through some of the very educated, well-educated people in the area of flooding and mapping have been afforded to us through Anthropocene and through the Higher Ground Network. And we are very happy to be a part of the organization. And I'm very happy to be a part of the board and the council. So we have learned quite a bit about flooding. We have learned quite a bit about the importance of understanding your low-lying areas, and also to understand exactly what people want in the community. Because many times what folks would do is come in to a community who want to help, and they'll tell people what to do instead of understand what people want and why. And that's what the Higher Ground Network has decided to do, and the people that fund it and the people that have funded our work through the Higher Ground Network. We are very appreciative of the freeness we have to sort of get out into our own community and to assess it and to do what we can to keep pointing folks to the resources that are there to assist them through the Higher Ground Network.
Wonderful, Hilton. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you being part of the network, being part of the leadership team. And I have learned so much from you too. And, you know, that's the way it works. My learning from people who are actually doing the work on the ground. So really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much for putting this together, and we appreciate your efforts most definitely. And I know you've been working very diligently and tireless since I met you, and know that it is definitely appreciated here in the city of Port Arthur. We're going to continue to do what we do on the ground. We have been having some Zoom meetings. As a matter of fact, I wanted to tell you, on Friday, we had a Zoom meeting, and a couple of people got on board, and we were educating them about the potential of home elevations or relocations. But what we're finding is that a large number of the people that we speak to are about elevation and sustainability. So that's huge. And I'm really happy to hear that, strange as that might sound, but we're gonna need as many soldiers here on the ground as possible to assist with helping to build sustainably and to save our communities and our coastal areas.
Thank you very much, Hilton. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.